Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order this third session of Gaming Commission meeting number 134, a session that we have called to begin the day by talking about the claims of material error that we have received from the applicants. We're going to deal with the claims of material error that deal with the Monday presentations, first of all. We got those yesterday, have considered them, have responses to them, and we'll deal with those now. And then we'll take a short recess, short break to deal with the claims with respect to yesterday's proceedings. The deadline for those was not until 9:30 this morning, and we're considering, our consultants are considering them now, so we'll take a short recess so we can formulate responses and then come back and present those responses. Some of the claims of error bled over into concerns about the proposed conditions that individual commissioners proposed over the last 2 days. We're not going to deal with them during these first two parts of the session today. We'll deal with them when we get to a discussion, collaborative discussion, about the conditions that we're going to impose, or at least going to put to the applicants for their response. We haven't decided that yet, as I said yesterday. The conditions mentioned by individual commissioners are just that. They're conditions mentioned by individual commissioners. And we want to talk to them about them collaboratively before we decide that they should go to the applicants for a response. So that's how we're going to handle that. In the end, everybody will have a full opportunity to respond to each part of this process. But that's the order in which we're going to take it. We'll respond to the claims of material error, I think, in the way that we made the presentations, in the order, that is, that we made the presentations. And so I'll begin with the responses. And I should say this about the form of the responses. Some first of all, the claims will be posted on the website so that everybody can see what the letters were and what the claims of error were. Many of the claims refer to not the presentations that were made as much as they do the contents of the formal reports that each commissioner prepared and that also are posted on the website. And there are some changes that we're going to make as a result of the claims to those, some changes to the reports that we will make. Each of us is going to touch on those claims at a high level and not read the technical changes that'll be made, but we'll explain what changes are going to be made. And I don't think there'll be any misunderstanding or doubt about what the nature of the change is. So we'll proceed in that fashion, and then we'll make the changes and post those changes on the website where the original reports have been posted. So let me begin by dealing with the claims with respect to the presentation that I made on Monday to lead off this process of presentations, presentation, I should say, related to building and site design. Mohegan Sun, Massachusetts made two claims. Mohegan Sun said, first of all, he would like to note that as part of the clarification, I said in my presentation that in the LEED certification process, you'll remember that that's the green energy or the sustainable energy component of the application. I said that Mohegan Sun had committed to a level of 66 points. In fact, a clarification raised that number to 69 points, and I missed that clarification. What they did was take an aspirational credit of 3 points. They had 3 points that they thought they could get for using energy-efficient vehicles. They thought they could get it. And then on further reflection, they concluded that they could get it. So they claimed that as something they were in fact going to do rather than something they were going to aspire to. That raised their total to 69 points. Doesn't change, in my view, the overall rating, but it does indicate the flexibility of that standard and the ability of developers to move one credit to another, and that's going to happen again for both developers as the plans move forward. So we acknowledge that mistake, and we'll correct it and ensure that the presentation shows that Mohegan Sun, Massachusetts has a total of 69 points that they're claiming. The second one is Mohegan Sun says that the reference images on pages 53 through 55 of my presentation were not supplied by Mohegan Sun, nor are we aware of that the images are from a Mohegan Sun facility. Those were images of not what was proposed for this facility, but reference images of public spaces, hotel lobby, and dining spaces. The images on page 53 came from the application, the answer to question 411. The supplement, the last slide on the supplement, contained those reference images. The images on page 54 came from the answer to question 413. The reference slides in the slides in attachment 2 to that answer, the last slide contains those images. And the images on page 55 came from answer 416 to the application again from attachment 2, the last slide. So those images were in fact supplied by Mohegan Sun. If they don't have anything to do with the Mohegan Sun facility, then I'd welcome an explanation as to why they're there, but that's where they came from. Insofar as the Wynn claims of material error are concerned, they all have to do with the report that we prepared, and that I prepared, and that is posted on the website. The first claim is that the permitting schedules conclude that Mohegan Sun will finish, our permitting schedules will conclude that Mohegan Sun will finish earlier than Wynn based on a faster conclusion of the MEPA regulatory process by Mohegan Sun and a longer construction period by Wynn Everett. In reality, Wynn Everett is further along in the MEPA process than Mohegan Sun. Yes and no is my response. Wynn's response to the schedule, they are at a different stage of the schedule. They still have a number of steps to go through before the permitting is completely finished. It's my estimate, based on the conversations and advice of the consultants, that the schedule that we have posted is a reasonable one. It is entirely possible that an accelerated construction schedule or an accelerated permitting schedule will change that. That's an estimate at the moment, and that's the best estimate that we have. The second error is that Wynn states that it's in discussion with the MBTA. I said in the report, I said that Wynn needed to get some property from the MBTA in order to affect its preferred method of entry into the site. And the report, I noted in the presentation that they had signed an agreement now with the MBTA to begin the public bidding process that's necessary. The report was prepared earlier, before we were informed of that. It does not say anything about the fact that the permitting, there is an agreement now to put it through the public bidding process. We will change the report to reflect that, because that's accurate. But in the presentation, I did note that, and we are aware of that. So we'll make sure the report is congruent with what we understand. The third is that the Wynn commits to achieving our report says Wynn commits to achieving a project that would be certifiable under U.S. LEED certifiable at the level of gold or better. But I made the point in the presentation that there was no commitment to have it certified, unlike Mohegan Sun. And Wynn's claim is that that's an error, because you can't certify a building until it's built. I get that. And if it's certified, that's terrific, and we hope that it will be certified. So we look forward to that. We look forward to that happening. In the traffic and parking review area, Wynn says that an estimate, our statement that an estimate of traffic volumes that we would be expected to use the busway link in Sullivan Square. You may or may not remember that we talked about the busway link. Actually, Commissioner Cameron spent more time on it than I did, but the busway link is part of the solution for Sullivan Square. And said that in our report that an estimate of the traffic volumes was not provided. Wynn says that they're in consultations with Mass Department of Transportation. We look forward to the results of those. Conversations. There are 2 or 3 other claims of error in that regard that are really claims that we didn't acknowledge that they were in discussions with Mass Department of Transportation. We understand that those conversations are going forward, but they're conversations that are going forward. And the information contained in the report is the best information that we have at the moment. In our report and in my presentation and in Commissioner Cameron's presentation, we mentioned that insofar as Sullivan Square was concerned, Wynn had proposed changes to the west side of the square, not to the east side. And Wynn says that it is not planning, and the east side drains Main Street, Rutherford Avenue, and Medford Street, coming out of Charlestown. And Wynn says that it is not doing that because it's not adding any traffic to Main Street or Rutherford Avenue or Medford. And therefore, it shouldn't be responsible for making any changes. Well, if you, in my view, if you put more traffic into the circle from one place, you're going to adversely affect traffic in another place. So that needs to be considered, I submit, in an overall approach to the Sullivan Square solution. And I do not believe that that's the way we presented that is a material error. And finally, we said in the report that Wynn's current mitigation plans did not include any discussion of a collaborative process between the applicant, the City of Boston, and various other interested parties that would need to occur in order to move the process forward in determining a preferred long-term solution and design and construction of that preferred solution. Wynn's claim is that that's a material error because they have committed in their best and final offer to providing an amount of money that can be used by anybody who wants to use it, by the city, to implement whatever solution the city wants to implement. I said in the presentation the other day, and I reiterate now, that a simple concrete and asphalt fix is not necessarily going to solve this problem. There are permitting issues that have to be considered. There are, in the course of the permitting issues, traffic reduction issues that have to be considered. This has to be a collaborative process. The Commission cannot impose a number. The Commission cannot impose a configuration to traffic lanes, a striping plan, a stoplight signaling plan. Wynn can't do it by itself. I mentioned that yesterday. The Commission can't do it by itself. The political leadership and the permitting authorities, which are part of the political establishment, have to be involved. And that's what that part of the report was aimed at. Without that kind of collaborative involvement, no solution that anybody picks out and says is the desirable solution can succeed. So that's the point that part of the report was designed to make. That's the point that I reiterate today. And that concludes my piece of dealing with the claims of material error from Monday. There are some from Tuesday, and we'll get to those later. All right. The next presenter was Commissioner Zuniga.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Rob to come up front in case there's questions from the commissioners to be available. I will deal with the claims of material errors myself, but in case we have questions or need to refer to Rob, he'd be available. Melissa, do you have the finance presentation available? If you don't mind, I'm going to refer to a couple of slides as well. And it may be helpful for the audience to see which slide I'm talking about. It's not on all of them. So we received a letter from Mohegan Sun stating that there are a number of material errors and omissions regarding the finance presentation. The letter is, in our view, can be organized by topics, which is how I am going to talk about them, not necessarily refer to all of the letter. First, Mohegan Sun asserts there's an error in the depiction of the Mohegan Sun funding plan on page 14. Melissa, please. And this funding plan depiction is inaccurate based on 3 factual inaccuracies. So I'm going to take each one of them at a time. They said the first inaccuracy being that 82.9 million figure that appears on this chart of senior debt payment would likely result in a more modest amount of 30 million.
Sorry, Enrique.
Oh.
It's loading.
It's loading?
We can just wait for a second. Until
We can wait for, okay.
Yeah. Not much you can do with these machines. You can't talk to them. There we go.
So to recap a little bit, the assertion of an error relative to the funding plan, the first part of that being that the $82.9 million senior debt payment that we calculated would likely result, in their view, on a more modest amount of 30 million. We don't believe this is a matter of a material error. We believe this is a difference of interpretation. The purpose of this chart and this funding plan was simply to illustrate which entities would ultimately participate in distributions in either a base case scenario or a worst case scenario. In our presentation, we contemplated that the third-party debt would be retired on an equal payment basis over the 15-year period, which is the term of the license. And that footnote that I'm sure many of you cannot see states just that. We've assumed that the $732 million senior debt with a 7.5% interest rate over that period would come up to that annual payment. The written report, however, identifies on page 63, and we don't have to necessarily flip through all of that in the presentation, that the applicant has stated that about approximately $528 million would be outstanding at the end of the license term. Because this is highly technical, I can take questions from each one of these or from commissioners if you think, or just keep going. Okay. The second assertion of a material error that Mohegan lets us know relative to the funding plan says that the Suffolk stakeholder income in the same chart and the ground lease payment do not match. And this is, in fact, an error. The $39.9 million at the bottom that corresponds to the figure on the top will be corrected. And indeed, Commissioner McHugh actually pointed that out during the presentation. The third assertion about a material error on the funding plan reads that Brigade, or we assume that Brigade, Mohegan, and Sterling Suffolk had decided to split the stakeholder income into thirds under the base case. We don't believe this to be a material error. The commission, indeed myself, stated that the deal was structured so that the stakeholder income be split three ways, was based on the base case scenario, and this is our analysis of those figures. Mohegan has stated that this is just a coincidence, which may be the case. This is in no way affecting my rating of the Mohegan Sun ability to obtain project capital.
Well, I did want to comment on that one. I heard that when the presentation was made, and that is, and I think you've clarified it now, that's an inference that you drew from the numbers that appear at the bottom of that chart. Is that right?
That's right.
And that inference affected or did not affect the rating?
It does not. The purpose of this chart is to illustrate what happens under two scenarios, that the distributions to the parties are quite different if in the event of revenues not materializing the way they project them.
Right. So whether or not they agreed to a three-way split, or whether or not it is coincidence, as they claim, is really immaterial to the analytical outcome.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The second topic in the letter from Mohegan Sun refers to a notion that Mohegan Sun only has $45 million to initiate development, and they assert that this notion is not true. We believe this is not a material error. We noted in my presentation that 45 million, and the report, that 45 million of stated equity was available to initiate construction, not financing. It was never stated that 45 million altogether would be available to initiate construction. I could leave it at that. This dovetails a little bit into that notion of conditions, but I could take questions if you think you want to discuss.
Were you going to discuss anything more about that claim, Commissioner?
I can if you want me to.
No. But if you were, I had another observation, because the letter goes on to talk about a way typically things are accounted for and the like, and it seemed to me that we were talking about what was available cash now, not how things are accounted for in an overall scheme. We're talking about how much equity money is left now to participate in further expenditures.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Rather than how it's all accounted for at the end.
Yes.
Right.
That's right. Okay, there's a third topic relative to, in Mohegan's letter, they assert there's an error on the Commission's presentation, having incorrectly characterized that the preferred equity interest is short-term debt. This, as I stated in the presentation, certainly during the presentation, we don't believe this is a material error. This is a matter of interpretation. What I stated is that I believe that this type of interest behaves more like a debt. It may be, the nomenclature may be totally fine, preferred equity or preferred interest. In my opinion and observation is that the stipulated 15% annual return makes it behave a lot more like debt.
So it's subordinated, it comes right above
It comes-
the ordinary equity.
That's right.
And it pays interest, so it has some characteristics of both.
Of the
And-
both, right, right. A fourth topic here is Mohegan asserts there's an error that the disregard of brigade's financial strength in analyzing the current financial strength of the applicant was not considered. I guess they assert that their financial strength was disregarded. We don't believe this to be a material error. I could, you have page 17? I think that's on the appendices, and you might not have it. But page 17 of the finance report states that that brigade's strength is clearly demonstrated. We did consider the financial strength of both brigade and Mohegan. Page 17, Melissa, if you could go to that. It's in the presentation. Now I remembered. States. Sorry, it was a chart with the public companies. I don't have that. That's not page 17. It's page 19. I'm sorry. Page 19. The title of the page is a comparison of the gaming, publicly traded gaming companies. We were able to put Mohegan Sun there because they do borrow from the capital markets, and all of the ratios are evaluated. We, of course, cannot have an equal comparison of Brigade's financials. This is perhaps a little similar to what we did when we evaluated Cordish, a private company, against Penn and Raynham. Penn, there was a lot of information. In fact, it is over there. We can ascertain ratios to get to some of the financial strength. In our case, we have to glean information from other sources, not this source exclusively. In my view, this would not change the rating, and that's my response. Going on to the next topic of the letter, Mohegan Sun asserts that there's an error when characterizing or accounting for the 105 million in pre-development costs or spend, and the difference between characterizing some of that as eligible or ineligible. In our presentation, we characterized all of that as ineligible. We determined, our determination, well, our belief is that this is not a material error. This is a matter of interpretation. Our determination of all eligible costs, and Melissa, perhaps you could go to that slide. I forget where it is.
27. Oh, sorry.
27 or 26.
26, actually.
Our determination of eligible costs was based on our understanding of all the financials provided. And there were different formats. Initially, we asked the applicants to characterize and go back and group certain costs differently. There was a little bit of back and forth. But that said, even if the 59 million that Mohegan asserts should be counted as eligible costs that they have spent to date, this would, in my mind, not change the rating. The rating I was analyzing in terms of and comparing to the other applicant. Any questions on that so far, or?
No, so if it's an interpretive matter, then you're prepared to give Mohegan Sun the benefit of the doubt
Right.
and accept their interpretation for purposes of proceeding further.
That's right.
Yeah.
Number 6, Mohegan Sun asserts there's an error relative to the opening date on page 9. Remind me. There's a timeline for construction. We have an error. We have a slide.
Page 30.
Page 9.
Page 30, actually.
I'm sorry. Yes. The chart there reads that the Mohegan Sun opening date is listed as not provided, and it has been identified as September of 2017. Excuse me. We do not believe this to be a material error, but the date will be remedied, and we will correct it.
Well, we had a date in the building and site design chart.
Correct.
And then it's the same date, obviously.
Correct.
We'll use that.
Yes. Similarly, I don't believe this would have an impact on our interpretations of the factors that matter to the rating. Next, Mohegan
The
asserts...
30 months on that slide that's still up there, that doesn't change.
That's correct.
That is what we used for building and site design as well.
That's right. And from a finance perspective, when it came to this rating, and I'm pretty sure I discussed this, these are highly complex projects either way. The construction schedule is long and has a lot of moving pieces. And from a finance perspective, they both appear to me to be very comparable. Next, Mohegan asserts there's an error relative to the market assessment. The market assessment section fails to consider the rest of Mohegan's, MSM's RFA2 responses and the clarification responses MSN has already provided. They state that it is a material error for the Commission and our consultants HLT to rely almost exclusively on the PKF market study that they provided as statement of future marketing intentions. We don't believe this to be a material error. The applicant has clearly stated that revenue projections were derived from the PKF market study, and we took those assertions to be the case. I can take questions on that if you believe it merits more discussion.
I'm not sure it does. But if I understand you correctly, they gave us a study. We used that study as the test for the projections that you did, or you used it, and that's the basis for the...
Yes. They provided the study to derive the projections, and we've also used that study to derive their marketing intentions.
But the study was dated December of last year, right? That was
Correct.
done in December of last year before the application was filed.
Correct.
And that's the study that they provided?
Correct.
That's the study that you
it's
used?
It's their own study, right.
Okay.
Now, the basis or the basis for the market assessment section from our perspective is HLT has done a framework to compare those projections and marketing plans, from all applicants. But that's not what is
Right.
being disputed here.
But the other information was considered.
Absolutely. Yep. Actually, I should mention, when Mohegan Sun provided a summary on August 21st, a summary of, they sent us letters relative to each of the sections. In that letter, they assert that the PKF consulting report is comprehensive and conservative. It projects primary and secondary zones that are within reasonable driving distances. The report acknowledges that Mohegan Sun could generate revenue from beyond its market area, but conservatively acknowledges that these visitors will lead to relatively modest additional revenue for the casino. MSM has provided plans to market to the geographic area that PKF Consulting has identified as the primary and secondary market areas.
So that was the letter we got in late August that referred to the December study.
Correct.
Okay.
Number 8, there's MSM asserts there's an error in the sense that MSM will not be able to assert full control over third-party tenants. We don't believe this to be a matter of a material error. We believe this is a matter of interpretation. When we discussed the notion of flexibility and control through a couple of the slides, our intention was not to imply that Mohegan's leasing to third-party tenants is outside of industry norms. Our assertion was that leasing 100% of food and beverage outlets on the property comes with more risk and less control than owning some of the operations of food and beverage. We do appreciate that the terms and conditions of the retail, dining, and entertainment lease with New England Development and Finard includes control of the product. It will include minimum hours of operations, employee relations, hospitality standards, compliance with the Mohegan Sun Momentum Points program. That said, these items will ultimately have to be agreed to by the third-party tenants that New England Development and Finard enters and subleases to. The concern is that having to enforce these terms and conditions is more onerous than having direct control. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay. Now, there's 4 other topics that, 4 other assertions that all relate to the marketing restriction. I'll read the topics that we gleaned from the letter, but I will reserve some of that discussion for later on this afternoon. Let me just mention what Mohegan asserts, again, in understanding and gleaning the topics that they've articulated in the letter. Mohegan Sun asserts there's an error in the sense that Mohegan Sun does not have access to the entire Mohegan Sun database. I will mention these. The reports are, in our opinion, not incorrect. We did incorrectly, orally, stated that the marketing restriction was limited to the 30-minute drive, and we know that to be slightly, in general, limited to the 60-minute drive from the facility.
So the report is accurate, but
the report is accurate.
Presentation,
the oral presentation, when actually, when you asked the question, Commissioner, on a map that was
Right.
that had a green
Right.
30-minute drive and a later orange.
Right.
I stated incorrectly that the seed database was limited to that area. It is not, and I understand that.
And I probably compounded the error by using for point of discussion, roughly inside the 495 belt.
That's right. That's right.
And I understood that it goes farther to the south, it goes farther to the south, farther to the north, and slightly farther west. I was using that simply as a talking point.
As a proxy.
The chart is part of the presentation, it's part of the materials, part of the report, and the zip codes are all part of the, precise zip codes are all part of the application. So
Correct.
I was using that simply as a method of facilitating the discussion.
Right. Actually, to further complicate the depiction, the marketing restriction applies to zip codes, and what we represented in the PowerPoint are counties and cities and towns, so they don't perfectly align.
So the analysis was done on the proper numbers.
Yes. But to correct the record on the oral statements that we made, the Commission appreciates that Mohegan Sun, Massachusetts seed database will include all existing customers, not just those in the defined market area.
Okay, so that is a change.
That is a change,
Yeah.
yep.
So the seed customers are the entire database.
That's right.
Not just those in
In the defined market area.
Yeah. All right. So we understand that change. And we'll make it.
Yep. Any oral references on Monday will be corrected, or were incorrect relative to that effect. Number 10, Mohegan Sun asserts there's an error. Mohegan Sun shares data for customers outside of the specified zone. These, I believe, we already addressed. I already talked a little bit about their next assertion that relative to this marketing restriction, that it applies to the 30-minute drive time, and that's an error. We agree that the oral statement will be remedied. It applies, as already discussed here. Lastly, Mohegan Sun states there's an error in that Brigade's interest is not aligned to MGC. When we depicted some of that in one of the slides, I forget exactly which one. We don't believe this to be a material error. We believe it's a matter of interpretation. Their assertion is that Brigade's interest and those of the Mohegan Sun, those of the Commission are perfectly aligned. And as I stated, this dovetails a little bit into the condition that we had, so I could leave it at that at this point.
And discuss it further when we come to the
Yes.
desirability and efficacy of the conditions.
Correct.
Okay?
Any questions? Rob, anything you think you would further clarify? Thank you.
All right. Now, are there other, Commissioner, do you have any that you're prepared to deal with now, or do you want
No,
to?
I'll be
All right.
prepared after,
And,
after a break.
all right, so the Commissioner's claims with respect to Commissioner Cameron's presentation and Commissioner Stebbins' presentation came in at 9:30 this morning. That was the deadline we set, so they were timely. But we need a few minutes more to consider them, and so I'm going to have a break now, and we'll resume. It's 11:30 now. I think we'll resume at 12:30. I think that the response to those probably won't take us long, so we'll resume at 12:30, deal with that, and then probably break for lunch and begin the condition discussion right after lunch. So that'll be the schedule.
Do we need an hour?
We do need another hour for that. So that'll be the schedule that we'll plan to follow. Let me just, Janice, can we take a lunch break now and come back? All right. Yeah. This is a fluid process where you have not stage managed all this.
So this will become a working lunch,
This-
Commissioner.
Right. Yeah. So let's just see if we can do that. That probably makes more sense to take a lunch break now and finish the work and then come back and proceed further if we can.
We could always just resume at 1, say, regardless of how much we work or eat.
How much we eat?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not quite fair for the two other commissioners, but
We could do that. Why don't we do that? That's a great solution. That's why we have 4 of us. Let's take a recess now and resume at 1 o'clock.